Have you ever wondered what would have happened if you invested just $10 into Bitcoin back in 2013? Today we are going to answer this question and also share some details about one lucky investor who was able to turn their $417 investment into over $4 million. Let's get started. So how much money would you have now if you had purchased $10 worth of Bitcoin back in 2013? The answer is that it depends on when exactly you bought it. For example, if you had bought $10 worth of Bitcoin on January 1st, 2013, you would have received 0.0897 Bitcoin. At the time of recording this video, one Bitcoin is worth around $36,000, which means your initial $10 investment would be worth around $32,000. However, if you'd waited until December 31st, 2013 to purchase your $10 worth of Bitcoin, then you would have made nearly as much money, because during that year the price of Bitcoin went through quite a few ups and downs. So on that day you would have received only 0.05 for Bitcoin for your $10, meaning your investment would only be worth around $1,900 today instead of over $32,000. This shows that even though investing in cryptocurrency can be highly profitable, it's also very risky because the prices are so volatile. With that said, many people still want to know what would have happened if they had invested $10 into Bitcoin at any point in 2013. Well, luckily for us, there are plenty of charts available online showing the price of Bitcoin throughout 2013. So let us take a look at them now. We'll start off with the first chart, which shows the average price of Bitcoin each month during 2013. We'll use this chart to figure out exactly how much money we would have made from our $10 investment if we had bought in on the first day of each month. As you can see, the price of Bitcoin ranged from around $120 all the way up to around $1,100 per coin. If we go back to our previous example where we bought 0.0897 Bitcoin on January 1st, 2013, we could use these numbers to estimate our ROI, or return on investment. Our 0.0897 Bitcoin would have been worth around $107 at the beginning of February, when the average price was $120 per coin. Then it would have increased in value throughout the year until reaching a peak of around $1,000 in December. This means that if you had bought your $10 worth of Bitcoin at the start of January 2013, then your investment would have grown by over 1,000% by the end of the year. Of course, this doesn't tell us anything useful about how much money you'd make if you'd invested at some other point during the year. So let us take a closer look at the second chart, which shows the price of Bitcoin on a weekly basis. This will allow us to determine exactly how much money we would have made from our $10 investment no matter when during 2013 we decided to buy it. To do this, simply find the date that's closest to when you actually bought your Bitcoin. Then take note of the price per coin at that time. For example, let's say you had bought your Bitcoin on May 6, 2013. We can then see from the chart that the price of Bitcoin was around $86 per coin on that day. This means that your $10 would have been worth around $117 if you held on until December, when the price reached its peak of around $1,100. That means that your initial $10 investment would have generated a profit of around 1,000%. Of course, this is only an estimate based on historical data, and past performance is not indicative of future results. However, it does give us a good idea of what might happen if we were to invest in Bitcoin today and hold on for a year or two. Now let's talk about a real-life example of someone who did just that. A man from Florida recently sold his Bitcoin after holding on to it for around 9 years. He only invested $417 worth of Bitcoin back in 2013. But because he didn't sell when the price peaked in December of that year, his investment grew to be worth over $4 million. That's right. When he purchased his Bitcoin on December 2013, he spent around $417. But because he didn't sell his coins, he was able to ride the wave of Bitcoin's insane growth and generate a $4 million profit. If you're wondering exactly how much Bitcoin he bought back then, the answer is 0.15 Bitcoin. This wasn't a huge amount of Bitcoin, considering that one Bitcoin is currently worth over $36,000. So at the time, his 0.15 Bitcoin were worth around $55. As we've seen, the price of Bitcoin skyrocketed in December 2013, reaching almost $1,100 per coin. This meant that by holding on to his Bitcoin for just a few months, our Floridian friend was able to turn his initial $55 investment into over $1,600. But he didn't stop there. Instead of selling his Bitcoin and cashing out his profits, he continued holding. Fast forward to today, and his 0.15 Bitcoin are now worth over $4 million. Of course, this is just an extraordinary example, and most people do and have the patience or discipline to hold on to their Bitcoin for 9 years without selling. But it does show that investing in cryptocurrency can be extremely lucrative if you are willing to take the risk. Unfortunately, we don't know what exactly happened in this situation. For example, maybe the man invested more money into Bitcoin over the years. But even if we assume that he only put in his initial $417, that would still mean that he generated a profit of over 99%. But why did he wait so long before finally deciding to sell? Turns out that he only did this because he forgot about his Bitcoin. Yes, you heard that correctly. Literally forgot about his investment for nearly a decade. It seems that he purchased his Bitcoin back in 2013 as part of a business transaction. And after sending the Bitcoin to his wallet, he just never checked on it again. Fast forward to 2022, and he decided to check his old wallet for the first time in 9 years. That's when he realized that his Bitcoin was worth over $4 million. He could have easily sold his Bitcoin at that point and walked away with a nice $4 million profit. It looks like he decided to hold on a little bit longer. The man waited another 6 months before finally cashing out his Bitcoin. In hindsight, this probably wasn't the best decision, because Bitcoin's price has since crashed from its all-time high of around $69,000 to its current value of around $36,000. This means that if he had sold his Bitcoin in June, he would have made over $8 million instead of the $4 million that he eventually settled for. But even though he missed out on some potential profits, it's still a pretty good return on his initial investment of $417. What's even more amazing is that he could have turned his $417 investment into over $42 million if he had just held on to his Bitcoin for another year. Yeah, you heard that correctly. Just imagine what would have happened if he had invested just a little bit more money and bought one Bitcoin back in 2013. Today, his investment would be worth over $42 million. Of course, this is just a hypothetical example, and he would have needed to invest over $41,000 to buy one whole Bitcoin back then. But it's still interesting to think about what could have been. With that said, it's important to remember that investing in cryptocurrency is risky and volatile, so please don't invest more money than you can afford to lose. Now let's move on to the next section of the video. If you had invested $10 into Ethereum back in 2014, how much money would you have now? To answer this question, we need to do some research. First, we need to figure out how many Ether you could have bought with $10 in 2014. To do this, we can visit a website called CoinMarketCap.com and look up the price of Ether on the charts. We'll start off by looking at the price of Ether on January 1st, 2014. According to the charts, 1 Ether was worth around $318 at that time. This means that with $10, you could have bought around 3.13 Ether. Next, we need to figure out how much money our 3.13 Ether would be worth today. To do this, we can visit another website called CoinGecko and look up the current price of Ether. As of recording this video, 1 Ether is worth around $3,200. This means that our 3.13 Ether would be worth around $10,000. This means that if you had invested $10 into Ether on January 1st, 2014, your investment would be worth around $10,000 today. But what if you had waited until December 31st, 2014 to buy your Ether? In that case, 1 Ether would have cost around $448, meaning you could have only bought around 2.23 Ether with your $10. Then if you had held on to your Ether until today, it would be worth around $7,200. This shows that even though investing in cryptocurrencies like Ether can be highly profitable, it's also very risky because the prices are so volatile. So there you have it. These are just a few examples of how much money you would have made if you had invested $10 into Bitcoin or Ether back in 2013 or 2014. Of course, this is just speculation based on historical data, and past performance is not indicative of future results. But it does give us a good idea of what might happen if we were to invest in these cryptocurrencies today and hold on for a year or two. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy investing.